because I'm of a certain age, so I could have heard it and just...
I am too. I'll get it for you, and then we'll let you take it away.
You got it.
All right. The Purple Heart is awarded to an officer who was killed or suffered serious bodily injury while confronting or attempting to apprehend an armed or fleeing individual in the performance of their duties under honorable circumstances.
The Purple Heart and the Medal of Honor go to officers Ryan Lane and Stephen Elliott. The Life-Saving Award goes to officers Connor Finch, Arnaldo Collazo, and Frank Gunn II.
Back on December 1st of 2021, officers Ryan Lane and Stephen Elliott responded to a possible disturbance at 1457 Fairfield Avenue. When the officers got to that scene, they were met by that caller, who was an adult male who pointed down the street towards Woodlawn Avenue. The caller told the officers that a white male suspect had been harassing him. When the officers turned to go find that alleged suspect, the caller attacked Officer Lane with a knife he had concealed in his hoodie. The caller slashed Officer Lane's lower neck around his collarbone. At this time, Officer Elliott turned and quickly approached the subject in an effort to help Officer Lane, who was under attack. When Officer Lane was able to disengage, the caller then attacked Officer Elliott and stabbed him in the neck, causing severe bleeding. Officer Elliott then put several feet of distance during all of this between himself and the caller began to walk towards Officer Lane, who was walking back towards the street. Both officers drew their issued firearms and gave the caller loud, clear, and calm verbal commands to get on the ground. The caller didn't listen. He continued to advance towards Officer Lane. Officers Lane and Elliott then fired their weapons several times, causing that caller to drop to the ground while still holding on to that knife. Both officers continued to give commands to the caller to throw the knife away from him. At this time, Officers Lane and Elliott can be heard checking on each other to make sure that they were okay. Officer Lane, noticing his partner was bleeding heavily from the neck, told Officer Elliott to apply pressure to his neck until responding officers could begin to treat his wound. Throughout this entire incident, despite everything going on, both officers could be heard talking to each other and the suspect in a clear and calm manner.
Officers quick respond to the scene. Officer Finch quickly jumped in and began to pack and bandage Officer Elliott's neck to slow that bleeding and prepare him for transport to the hospital. Officer Finch meticulously bandaging Officer Elliott's severe neck wound with his personally owned military equipment. Officer Collazo and Officer Gunn quickly assessed the situation and made the decision, that the fastest method for getting medical aid for both officers would be to load them into the patrol cars and just take them to the hospital. Anticipating this, Officer Collazo and Officer Gunn were ready and pulled their vehicles up to receive Officer Elliott and Lane.
Officer Collazo transported Officer Elliott as well as Officer Finch, who continued to provide care while they were on the way to the hospital. Officer Finch maintained constant pressure the entire time, and Sergeant Glass as well. Officer Gunn transported Officer Lane and Officer Riley, who was providing first aid. While driving to Eskenazi in an emergency status, both officers displayed confidence and self-control. They arrived at the hospital in impressive time, but most importantly, safely. Officer Elliott's injury resulted in his uniform and duty belt ruined due to blood saturation. Officer Elliott's wound was 11 centimeters long, requiring 12 stitches to close, punctured his jugular vein, punctured his saliva gland, and required approximately 2 months to heal. Officer Lane's laceration developed into a large hematoma, which required more than 2 months to fully heal. During his recovery, Officer Lane was not allowed to drive or wear load-bearing clothing like his ballistic vest out of fear that it could cause the hematoma to grow or burst. On the night of this incident, Officers Lane and Elliott performed in a courageous and conscious manner. Both of these officers exemplified IMPD's highest professional standards and are worthy of recognition. For these reasons, we honor you, Officers Lane and Elliott, with the Purple Heart and Medal of Valor. Providing medical care and the transportation, not done yet, of an injured is incredibly big responsibility and a burden. Officers Finch, Collazo, and Gunn, however, rose to this challenge expertly, and for these reasons we honor you with the Life-Saving Award.